Right, so the defence argument regarding UK national support for Israel has been one of significant debate. But now the truth, it appears, of the UK's exact role in the ongoing genocide happening has been blown wide open. The excuses so many of our politicians have come out with over the last year, both Tory and Starmer's Labour alike on this matter, but notably the latter, have been picked apart over the course of several months, chiefly by independent outlets, predominantly by Declassified UK, but others certainly as well, all in the face of government claims that arms supplies, arms sales to Israel from the UK are low, as if that is what it fundamentally all comes down to. Where mainstream outlets will fixate on those arms sales alone as the main driver of Israel's atrocities in Gaza and in Lebanon, and the UK provides proportionately little of that to let our government figures off the hook, where Starmer and David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, closed down 30 arms licenses to Israel in what was basically a gesture, some 300 arms licenses, of course, still being very much active. But having the arms is all well and good for Israel. Knowing where to use them, getting them into Israel, establishing targets, well, this all requires significant reconnaissance, spy missions. And the UK, according to a new Al Jazeera expose, have accounted for carrying out almost half of such missions for Israel. The UK government might not be a big arms supplier to Israel in the grand scheme of things, but we're providing more intelligence for the IDF than the US does. So we need to be really asking our government about that.
Well, an Al Jazeera investigation has revealed the extent of military support the United Kingdom and United States have given Israel in the past year. They created an air bridge that was vital for Israel to sustain the intensity of its war on Gaza. Our defense editor, Gatapoulos, breaks it down.
The evidence unearthed by Al Jazeera uses open-source flight data to show the scale of American and British involvement in Israel's war on Gaza and now Lebanon. The data shows more than 6,000 military flights in a year, including hundreds of transport missions ferrying arms to Israel. Israel flew only 20% of the 1,600 reconnaissance flights recorded, whereas the UK accounted for nearly half, using its Shadow R1 surveillance aircraft, which provided intelligence on ground movements in Gaza. The UK sent Israel targeting data en masse during 645 flights. The report reveals the extent of the weapons air bridge built for Israel. More than 1,200 military cargo flights made up the airlift over a year. Several bases in Europe were used with hundreds of flights from each, from the UK, Germany, Italy, Cyprus and Greece. It is this air bridge, together with a vast number of surveillance flights and air-to-air refuelling, that has sustained Israel's brutal war on Gaza and helped it expand its operations into southern Lebanon.
Right, so that was Al Jazeera's Gatapoulos there, explaining the UK's role in creating what he has called an air bridge to effectively act as DPD for Israeli weapons, as well as being the main driver of intelligence missions, reconnaissance, spying, surveillance, whatever you want to call it, establishing targets for the IDF across Gaza. It's open source flight data as well. This is what Declassified UK have been highlighting heavily in their coverage of such matters. That this is publicly available data. Anyone can actually look these flights up online. Numerous sites you can use. And the reason for that is that with commercial flights in the air as well, even the military have to make sure their flight plans are public knowledge to avoid any accidents. Take a look at this screenshot here. Pay particular attention to the aircraft column and look at the first letter. I'll come back to this in a moment. I've used Radar Box here, the site I've chosen to do this, but there are others, and having just typed in flights from RAF Akrotiri, the RAF base on Cyprus that has been the site of so much speculation, Declassified UK having been tracking flights to and from there in their coverage for quite some time, highlighting this matter of British flights regularly going into and out of Israel, and questioning that whilst the mainstream media completely ignore it. The suspicious and large number of flights, a blaring siren, if you will, that they keep on ignoring. But if you look at this image carefully, as I asked you to, pause the video, enlarge it if you have to, depending on what device you might be watching this video on, that first letter, look at all the flights in just the last few days as this image shows, that begin with the letter B, because all of those B flights indicates the aircraft being a Beach Shadow R1, just as Gatapoulos mentioned in that clip, as the reconnaissance aircraft, the surveillance aircraft providing intelligence on ground movements in Gaza. These are the flights that are telling Israel where people are, so they know where to go, know where to shoot, we assume, as the result of that would be, because we know their shooting and their killing has been indiscriminate. We've been watching this business in Israel and in Gaza for long enough to know that by now. If you were to click on any of those particular flights, because they're all clickable links, the satellite feed for where it has been exactly and where it is now is completely blocked. Now you might figure this is normal for RAF flights, but it isn't. You can see in real time where any other type of aircraft listed there is, but not the UK spy planes. I suppose that's the nature of the job, isn't it? But when the same site lists their last seen destinations, and that being Israel, but it doesn't tell us what its flight plan was in getting there, yet here we have Al Jazeera exposing the UK using these same aircraft to spy for Israel to tell the IDF about the movements of people in Gaza. That is horrifying that this now appears to have been confirmed. Doubly so when we now know the scale of surveillance flights the UK has been flying over Gaza too. Under the Tories first, absolutely, but continued now unabated, it seems, by Starmer's Labour. 9 flights at time of writing, if you were to look at that table again, surveillance flights since the 21st of this month, so just the last few days, carried out by RAF Beach Shadow R1s. 645 flights in the last year that have delivered to Israel targeting data, the claim by Al Jazeera. 1,200 flights delivering arms like some kind of militarised and empathy-deficient postman Pat. Did you note the direction the planes were all coming from in and out of, according to that Al Jazeera report, according to the animation they were playing behind Alex Gatapoulos there? I'll bet my bottom dollar the majority of those flights were going to and from Cyprus, as that appears to be the general direction. And that, of course, should be somewhat obvious, as we know it is the closest RAF base to Israel, and we know the UK has been allowing the US to use it as well. Their base is frankly at risk from the likes of Iraq and Syria in those countries, or in Iraq definitely, should they be too proactive in supplying Israel from that particular area, those Iranian proxies as I like to call them. Without these flights, though, without this intelligence gathering that has been going on, without this abuse of our armed forces, as I would call this, Israel wouldn't be able to conduct the genocide it is committing. And this report has blown wide open the UK's direct role in enabling this to continue. We couldn't be more complicit if we tried at this point. A direct link between Israel's actions and our own government, our own armed forces, is in my view now established beyond doubt. It also exposes government denials about such matters. This government, as it was only at the beginning of this month that Starmer's Armed Forces Minister Luke Pollard was asked if the surveillance flights were being used for military targeting. Pollard made the claim that they were being used solely to help with hostage rescue. Well, we've been pretty rubbish at that, in which case, given how few hostages Israel have actually managed to rescue, not that anyone at this point frankly believes that that is their main motivation. 645 flights having demonstrably passed on targeting data, as Al Jazeera are now reporting, prompts much harsher questions to be put to Luke Pollard now, going forwards, I fancy. An excerpt from the Morning Star damns this point further, though, with claims that British intelligence missions are not confined to the air either. An Israeli official disclosed to the New York Times that a secret British reconnaissance team was deployed to Israel early on in its attack on Gaza. The British team gives added value to its intelligence operations, he said, adding that Britain is providing intelligence that Israel cannot collect on its own. There is no evidence the new Labour government has brought this spy team home from Israel. A Ministry of Defence spokesperson told Declassified that Britain is not a participant in the war in Gaza, adding, "Our mandate is narrowly defined to focus on securing the release of the hostages only, including British nationals, with the RAF routinely conducting unarmed flights since December 2023 for this sole purpose." As much as the devastating effects of the arms Israel are deploying against civilians and the images of the aftermath of that across social media are what stick in our minds the most, we have to remember that there are those telling Israel where they need to strike. And with nearly half of all surveillance missions being flown by the UK, 47% of them by our UK armed forces, from an RAF base on Cyprus, in all likelihood for the most part, it seems obvious, the role in creating those scenes and the blood of the people affected falls on the UK as much as those who dropped the bomb or pulled the trigger. We need answers for this, because if this isn't absolutely complicity, I don't know what is, and it sure as hell isn't being done in my name. Where these actions conducted by Starmer's government are deplorable, no less are his words, and frankly, this video has now thrown more shade on the excuses made by Starmer in my video recommendation here, as he has now attempted to claim aid being blocked to Gaza is because of Russia attacking Ukrainian ports in the Black Sea. How about you send a surveillance plane overhead and see for yourself, Keith? Evidently you're quite capable. Get the details of that story here as your suggested next watch, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.